As I say in the book, that, this famous letter that Henry James wrote to his extremely depressed friend Grace Norton, and he begins the letter by saying, "I hardly know what to say." Henry James, and then he does, write a very beautiful letter. But the fact that his immediate response would be, "Here we are again. Language is always a step behind." I mean, language cannot give you the experience. It describes the experience. The writers are used to language letting them down. Well, the book is What Are You Going Through? Here it is. It's a novel, my latest novel. It was published in September 2020. And it's at the heart of the novel, there's a narrator, a woman, say she's in her 60s, and she begins by sharing with the reader conversations that she has with people that she encounters in the ordinary course of her day. And in one case, it's somebody she knows really well. It's a very good old friend of hers who happens to be in a hospital, and she goes to visit her because she has a terminal cancer, this friend of hers. Another person is a woman she meets at the gym, which then prompts her to remember a conversation she had with a woman she knew much longer ago, a talk with a neighbor. Sometimes it's a conversation that she's just eavesdropped on. And she notices a thread in all of these conversations. It's always somebody who seems to be going through something. I had in my head, aside from this story, the way I've described it, the very famous quote from an essay by Simone Weil: "The love of our neighbor in all its fullness simply means being able to say to him, 'What are you going through?'" So I always had that in my head, which it was, I always knew that that was going to be the title, even though I didn't know, as I never know when I'm writing a novel, where I was going to be going from page to page. I wrote this book in the same way that I've written all of my books, and they've all been books that could be described as me writing into the dark. I'll begin with something, like in this case, I did have that Simone Weil quote in my head, and I did have some ideas, but I really, I never make plans. I never make outlines. I try not to commit myself too much at all, because I just have this feeling that that it's going to be more convincing if one thing grows organically out of the other. And besides, that's more interesting to me. I like the freedom of that, So I just start with something, and then I write a certain number of pages, and then, once you do that, you've committed yourself to some part of the story. Then I try to get those pages as good as I can get them before moving on. And I proceed like that all the way to the end of the book. And while I'm working on it, I get ideas, I make some notes. I think, oh, what could happen later in this book? But I try really hard not to fall in love with that idea, because anything could happen. And it's happened to me that I've been so sure that the book must end this way, or that such and such an event must happen to my characters. And when I get to that point, it's no longer valid. By that time, things have happened to change the characters so that they wouldn't do that anymore, or else just the structure, it's all wrong. So that's why I don't like to get too attached to any idea I might have about the future. And I really, like with this book, I came to the ending, and I wrote the ending when I came to the ending. It happened while I was writing it. It took a long time to get those pages the way I wanted them, but I had no idea. I had no idea really how it was going to end. Well, I do both because I work linearly. So as I say, I'm writing this, I get the first pages down and I edit and revise and revise and revise and change, many, 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 many times before going on. But by the time I've done that, moving on and moving on, by the time the book is finished, then I don't go back and do edits and major revisions. I do very little because I've done it as I go along. Because there's another kind of writer who believes that who can only work in this other way, which is you've just got to get the whole thing down, the whole thing, no matter how rough or whatever, you've got to get it all down, the whole thing in a first draft, and then go back. And I've never tried it. It's so unnatural to me. I wouldn't do it. It even scares me. I have an almost superstitious fear of it because I think all those bad pages, all that bad writing, it would so inhibit me. And then I even think, oh, then what if I die suddenly and they'll come and see this mess and say, she couldn't really write it all. Look at this. She wrote. Oh, wait, maybe I should read just the opening one, two, three paragraphs or so. How about that? Okay. I went to hear a man give a talk. The event was held on a college campus. The man was a professor, but he taught at a different school in another part of the country. He was a well known author who earlier that year had won an international prize. But although the event was free and open to the public, the auditorium was only half full. I myself would not have been in the audience. I would not even have been in that town had it not been for a coincidence. A friend of mine was being treated in a local hospital that specializes in treating her particular type of cancer. I had come to visit this friend, this very dear old friend, whom I had not seen in several years, and whom, given the gravity of her illness, I might not see again. It was the third week of September 2017. I had booked a room through Airbnb. The host was a retired librarian, a widow. From her profile, I knew that she was also the mother of four, the grandmother of six, and that her hobbies included cooking and going to the theater. She lived on the top floor of a small condo about 2 miles from the hospital. The apartment was clean and tidy and smelled faintly of cumin. The guest room was decorated in the way that most people appear to have agreed will make a person feel at home. Plush area rugs, a bed with a hedge of pillows and a plump down duvet, a small table holding a ceramic pitcher of dried flowers, and on the nightstand, a stack of paperback mysteries. The kind of place where I never do feel at home. What most people call cozy, gemütlich, Hygge, others find stifling. A cat had been promised, but I saw no sign of one. Only later, when it was time for me to leave, would I learn that between my booking and my stay, the host's cat had died. She delivered this news brusquely, immediately changing the subject so that I couldn't ask her about it, which I was in fact going to do only because something in her manner made me think that she wanted to be asked about it. And it occurred to me that maybe it wasn't emotion that had made her change the subject like that, but rather worry that I might later complain. Depressing host talked too much about dead cat, the sort of comment you saw on the site all the time. In the kitchen, as I drank the coffee and ate from the tray of snacks the host had prepared for me, while she, in the way recommended for Airbnb hosts, made herself scarce, I studied the corkboard where she posted publicity for guests about goings on in town, an exhibition of Japanese prints, an arts and crafts fair, a visiting Canadian dance company, a jazz festival, a Caribbean culture festival, a schedule for the local sports arena, a spoken word reading, and that night at 7:30, the authors talk. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.